So yeah, this presentation is kind of both into bPanel generally, what it is, why we're working on it, what it'll help you with, but then also specifically we're going to help show how you can use it to interact with Handshake Node. This is a good opportunity for that, since Handshake is quite new, and so the tooling around it is just sort of getting started. So it kind of feels like a good opportunity, like a space for bPanel to get into. So the target audience for both this presentation and for bPanel is, well, bPanel itself is still rough. We technically have labeled it in alpha, so there are still going to be a lot of changes, a lot more tooling, like better user interfaces and documentation that are be coming up around it. But it's alpha, meaning that it's good enough to use and play around with. And our ultimate target audience for bPanel is kind of a broad space, and I'll get more into this later. But the idea would be we kind of want it available for enterprise users, so companies that are managing their own nodes, but they might want some admin or engineers that are not the VP of engineering that need to know all the CLI tools to be able to check in on their node to operate it on that way. But also for a consumer level, it's hobbyists that play around with their nodes, that manage their own wallets and their own full node, whether it's Handshake, bcoin, or bcash, which are the three networks or three blockchain implementations that we support, and don't want to be digging into the terminal every time. They want to make sure their node is fully synced up and check their balances. So kind of filling a few different niches, and yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
So this presentation is kind of going to be in two kind of parts. So I want to give some more, and also two different audiences. So there's the more engineer audiences that we hope will be building plugins, for example, that will be building on top of this platform. But then there's also the people that just want to start it up and interact with their node and don't really care about the technical aspects of it. So kind of try and be patient for the stuff that you're less interested in, but some of this I think will still be useful. So I start off with a bit about what exactly bPanel is, because we feel like we're kind of starting a new category of interfaces, and so the mental model around it is a little different than what you might be expecting. We'll talk about the architecture, which is useful not just from an engineering perspective, but also useful just to sort of understand where this fits into your stack, like where you're compared to running a node on your computer or on a virtual private server, or connecting to a node somewhere else. So just kind of visually seeing what that looks like. We'll go through the steps. This is sort of outside of bPanel, but for those who are not fully familiar with it yet, the steps for how to set up an HSD node locally as well as on a remote VPS. So that would be like setting it up on DigitalOcean or AWS. I won't actually do this setting up DigitalOcean part, but just you SSH in what you need to do to start it up so that it'll work with bPanel. Then we'll go through setting up bPanel. We'll show you kind of how you can connect bPanel to your nodes. What's cool about bPanel now is it's not just an interface on top of a single server or node. It's actually a way, and as you'll see with the architecture, it's a way to connect to lots of different nodes. So that includes all the different architectures that we support. So you could have one bPanel that connects to a bcoin testnet, a bcash mainnet, a Handshake testnet, and a Handshake mainnet. And that's pretty cool, and I'll show you how to set that up. Then I'll show you how to manage plugins. Plugins is really the heart and soul of what makes bPanel tick and what makes it useful. And this allows you to sort of create the interface that works for what you need. This is particularly useful in the case of Handshake right out of the box, because you need to do stuff like managing your names that your wallet controls. And then I'll do a little demo with the plugin that I built to help you do those things and connect up a bPanel instance with Handshake, both on testnet and regtest. Regtest just lets us mine some blocks and more easily interact with the network. Oh man, and actually, before we get to that, if anybody that has testnet coins somewhat easily on hand, it would be useful to have that available, and you can send my wallet.
I can send.
Okay, that'd be perfect. We'll wait till we get to that wallet. All right, cool. Any questions before I move on to that?
City by, I don't know which what's the timeline looks like for bPanel, but you said it's an alpha node.
Yeah.
Or just what do you see like beta and then
I don't know. It's kind of like an ongoing thing, right? If you consider that Gmail was in beta for 10 years. So one of our first real goals is to like get to a beta. There's a couple major plugins that we want to finish up that reduce how much things you need to do in the terminal. So basically get it to a point that once you've done an npm install and things are running, you don't need to use a terminal anymore. So some of that is, Mark is building out an advanced wallet plugin that also supports multisig, so you can really securely interact with your funds and your wallets. And then a couple plugins, like a settings plugin that will let you manage your config. So right now, to manage your connections to your nodes, you have to do that through the command line or like a text editor. That's very close. So we're about, like, I'd say a month or two away from beta, where we have those two out and we're kind of in a stable state. And then like a full release is, no interacting with the terminal. Another big feature that we're going to aim for is certain levels of authorization and authentication, so you can have different user levels interacting with a single bPanel instance. And then just a lot of like polish around the edges. Yeah, but that I don't have a great timeline on that one. Cool. Anything else? Cool. All right. So what is bPanel? So the sort of new category that I alluded to that we're calling it is a blockchain management system. And where this name comes from is you can kind of think of it like a WordPress for blockchain. So anyone that's familiar with WordPress kind of, it decentralized in a way the ability to develop and deploy your own websites. So you would have, you could very easily just spin up a MySQL database. You have this admin interface where you can install plugins that let you manage your content, and people could do this with very little knowledge of web development, whereas before, mid to late 90s sort of thing, if you're thinking, you kind of needed a team of web developers that knew HTML, knew CSS, knew database technology to sort of maintain these things. And WordPress and other systems like it are known as content management systems, CMS, and this is a blockchain management system, or BMS, with the idea being is that even with WordPress, you still have this sort of centralized database that you have this backend to your website that you are connecting to, that you are managing. But really, all a blockchain is a decentralized database. You don't have to actually maintain your database anymore. You just have to connect to a database, and you know that state is staying up to date. And one of the problems that we're trying to solve with bPanel is that there's not really any good systems for people to come up with their own creative user interfaces on top of this state machine known as the blockchain that we do know how it operates. So we generally right now rely on generally centralized UI platforms, whether it's a custodial type service like Coinbase, but even like Ledger or Copay that have these open source code bases. You're still sort of tied to the interfaces that they develop for you, and there's very little, unless you really know how to dig into this code, into their code, you can't do anything in addition to that. Or if somebody else builds on top of a fork of Copay, you still are relying on that single fork. So this is a UI layer between you and your node. So the node, and you don't even have to necessarily be the one controlling your node. If somebody is running a node that you trust, you can actually just connect your bPanel instance to that node if you want. Or you can run your own node. Once that's up and going, you can spin up several nodes and then have bPanel connect to it. And this is done almost entirely around plugins. This is very, very similar to sort of how WordPress, one of the things that I think WordPress really revolutionized in the space of web development, and even the ones that might seem like they're like overtaking WordPress, like Squarespace and I don't know, there's some other ones, but they still are built basically around plugins and the things that WordPress created. They just basically handle the server management for you. And in fact, they have a lot more control over the plugins. So bPanel uses a similar idea where anybody can publish plugins and anybody can install any published plugins onto their instance of bPanel. So just like my WordPress would look different from your WordPress, and the business, the e-commerce shop's WordPress down the street or whatever, my bPanel will look different from almost anyone else's bPanel. You can install themes. You can install different types of wallets. Maybe someone has a wallet that doesn't like SegWit and doesn't have anything SegWit enabled, and somebody else is only Bec32 addresses. Or you can have novel applications like I did a proof of concept for like publishing arbitrary data on the blockchain, and maybe not everybody needs that in their wallet, but you can just install this plugin if that's something that you want to do. So yeah, the goal is just to make it easy and practical to manage your own node. And there is a Medium post that I wrote to sort of announce the initial pre-alpha release of bPanel around the time of the hackathon earlier this year. And that goes into some of this in more detail. It also goes into a little bit into some of the sort of second half of it goes into the technical considerations that have gone into building out this system. Okay, so just a quick comment on the architecture. This is a diagram that we have on the website, bpanel.org. And really the important bit to see is that all that stuff in the bracket is what bPanel is. So bPanel on its own is a server that really just, it serves static JavaScript files that basically represent the app. And then these bPanel clients on the front, that's basically all the different browsers that are connecting to that server and interacting with it. From the bPanel server, from here, where it says, yeah, there we go. This isn't really shown here because this is kind of a new development, but this can actually connect to an arbitrary number of different nodes, and it can be bcoin nodes, it can be bcash nodes, handshake nodes, and connecting to the different networks as well. And you would have your single bPanel server that would connect to these number of nodes, and will basically point the clients, the browsers, at the node depending on what the browser has decided. And you can see here, I included this just to show that these nodes are still like normal for those that are comfortable with interacting with bcoin or handshake or HSD or bcash in the terminal. These nodes are just like normal nodes that you would be used to interacting with. So you can access them through bclient in the CLI or scripts or through whatever other JavaScript that you might be running in the browser or whatever. So they sort of exist on their own as well. So bPanel is something that's separate that helps you connect and interact with it. Anybody have any questions about that before I move on? Cool. All right, so for those who are following along at home, we'll sort of walk through getting things installed and set up. I have most of this already set up on my computer already because some of the install steps are a little bit time consuming. A big part of this is actually some of the tools that HSD, bcoin, bcash rely on have a pretty long compile time, and that's something that you have to go through just the first time, and then there's also some lengthy build steps the very first time for bPanel too. But what you'll need is bPanel. You'll also need a node that you're connect to, so we'll go through starting this node up, but if you have one already running, we'll walk through how to actually have bPanel connect to that one that is running. bPanel CLI is a separate package on NPM. It's a CLI, command line interface, so it's in your terminal. You can easily manage things in your bPanel instance. We'll go through how to use that as well and where that can be useful. And then the Docker and VPS are optional. I'll briefly talk about how Docker can be used in bPanel, just as I mentioned, for those that prefer it, and also it allows for an easy to sort of spin up test environment, which can be handy. Okay, so for those who haven't done this yet or who are unfamiliar, these are the steps to get things installed. So bPanel and HSD are basically the same. You're basically going to be git cloning, so basically copying down the project files from Git for both bPanel, and that's in bpanel-org, the bPanel org basically on GitHub, and the handshake-org on GitHub. And then the next step would be, in your terminal, you cd into that project, which is just a change directory, into that project directory, and then run npm install. npm install will kind of run through the initialization steps. So it's going to download a bunch of packages that are dependencies of bPanel and of HSD, and then run some of those build steps that I was talking about. Then bPanel CLI is a little different. This is a tool that you don't have to install globally, but it makes it easier to use. And you just do an npm install -g, and that's the name of the package on npm. And yeah, we'll show how that works later on. Okay, so running an HSD node, I'll show how to do this on my VPS. Couple things to remember. You literally can just run from inside the project directory. That's what this means here. You can just run /bin/hsd, and I don't know, does it default to mainnet, or is it's default to testnet? Okay. So you can just run this command /bin/hsd, and everything will start up. But some things to remember: highly recommend passing in an API key. And actually, if you go to the bcoin.io/API-docs, there is a command under the configs, a little command that our very own Matthew Zipkin put together that's like basically a one-liner to generate an API key, cryptographically secure API key, and it just prints it out to the terminal, and then you can paste that into here. And it actually uses our own bcrypto tools, which is cool as well. So I recommend having an API key. Now these last two things are kind of hard to know, and it's certainly tripped me up. But when you want to be able to connect to your node that's on a VPS, if it's on DigitalOcean or if it's on AWS, you need to pass these options in. And what this is basically telling HSD or bcoin is basically expose my node to external traffic. Otherwise, the only way you can access and query your node is locally. So if you are running it on a VPS, you'd have to SSH in and do the commands to make requests. So this is, you really need this. Not having this makes it more secure since nobody can really access it from externally. But if you want to run bPanel locally to connect to your node that's on a VPS, you really need to pass these in. And then recommended, that kind of just makes this easier, is to put these, that's all you really need, is just put these into a conf file. And that way, basically, HSD or bcoin will look to the conf file, and if it sees anything there, so you can basically persist your API key, which is super convenient, and not have to write this HTTP host. So the only thing is you have to just tell HSD which network you're going to be connecting to. So I can show you real quick. Yeah, mainnet defaults to the top. Yeah, so I'm in my, I made this one simple. You can hack it if you want. It's just my key. And yeah, I'm in my VPS on DigitalOcean now. And run that, and it gets going. I also already have a testnet server running on this. I briefly mentioned this earlier, but for those who are not familiar, RegTest is just basically a testing network that's useful for playing around with things, because one of the things that's useful for it is that you can just easily mine your own blocks. And so if you want to play around with receiving funds and balances, or in the case of Handshake, of purchasing names and practicing what that feels like, RegTest just lets you easily mine blocks, fund your wallet, and
reproduce bizarre scenarios.
Yeah, reproduce bizarre scenarios. The Docker script that we have that runs, it does bcoin by default, but it actually, when you spin it up, it automatically will mine 10 blocks for you, so you can start playing around with that, which is kind of cool. And what's fun too is that normally once you spin this up, you'd have to run some CLI commands to mine those blocks, but once you're pointing bPanel at it, you can just install. We have a miner plugin that you can use to mine those blocks and get started. So I'll show what that looks like in a second too. All right, questions about that? These things you can run locally as well. You don't have to do it on a VPS. Handshake's testnet's pretty small right now, so it doesn't really take up a lot. And then RegTest, certainly no problem for any of the networks. But if you're going to be careful about doing mainnet or Bitcoin mainnet or Bitcoin testnet even. That's not pruned because it's a big change. It's bigger now, isn't it?
Testnet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to like 2012
yeah.
or 2011.
So, what was the next slide? I don't remember. Whoops. Yeah. So. The way bPanel, so if you think back to the architecture diagram that I showed earlier, bPanel is a server that through this proxy can connect to whatever nodes you want. You need to tell bPanel how to connect to those nodes. There's a couple pieces of information that is needed so that it can make that connection. Because what it does internally is it loads up, JJ's built these awesome client tools that are specific for the networks that have these helper methods that let you do all the things that you could want to do and are capable of doing against these nodes. So what it does internally is, depending on the network, it'll either load the HS client or the bcoin clients, and based off of that, it will be able to make the request to the right node. You also need to tell bPanel or the client where to point to, and for that you need an IP address. If you're connecting to a node that's running on your computer, localhost is fine. These ports are network specific, so you can actually check in the docs for bcoin, bcash, and HSD what the ports are. Honestly, I need to make it a little bit more automatic, since these should be able to default to those network defaults. But yeah, there was some issues running into it. But we have example config files in the bPanel project that you can just copy and then just sort of copy and paste in the information that you're using instead. So I can.
It'd be fun to be specific there.
We should allow them to be specific, but if somebody's just like, this is my IP, you should be able to connect to that too.
Like if you don't put a port and you know that it's a Handshake testnet, it should be like, oh, here's the default port for you. That kind of stuff would be okay.
Let's see. So let's look at. I can just. So when you start up bPanel for the first time, it will create this kind of config directory, .bpanel. This is the same as what bcoin, HSD, bcash all do. They create this directory in your home directory that sort of stores the configs. You can see I also have a bcoin one, and yeah. So in bPanel, all of your clients, so you can see I mentioned here that any nodes you want bPanel to be able to connect to, you should have a config file, so you can see here in the notes, and I can share these slides as well so you can have this as a reference. Any ones that you want to connect to, you put them in clients. If you have a default one, bPanel will just use that by default when you run the startup command, which I'll show in a minute. And then you can have as many as you want here. So this Docker one is actually generated by the Docker script and passes in its own custom API key so that you can automatically connect to your Docker container. Let's see, this one is running. So you can see here, there's my key, there's the IP address of my VPS, it's running on RegTest, and it's on the Handshake chain. So as mentioned here, if you don't set network and chain, it'll default to Bitcoin and main. I just want to make a sort of nomenclature clarification for people here, the difference between an implementation and a chain and a network. So Handshake is different from HSD in the same way that Bitcoin is different from bcoin. So it would not work if you said here chain bcoin or a chain HSD. It does not understand that because HSD is not a chain. Handshake is a chain. bcoin is not a chain as much as people on our Slack would like us to offer an ICO. It's just an implementation. So if you're running into a problem that says, we have a check that like has recognized chains, so you might get an error if you were to put in the wrong thing. Same thing, like as much as some Twitter trolls would like bcash to be the name of a chain, it is also not the name of a chain. It is the name of an implementation. Bitcoin Cash is that chain.
Space separated or
No,
dash?
just single word.
Okay.
I believe it'll tell you if it's not. We do support cache. Yeah, it's like the same way that they do that, the prefix. Yeah, because in the comp files, I don't know, I feel like that's more appropriate for comp files and like single words. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. Don't let the trolls convince you otherwise. All right, what's this one? Oh yeah, so, forget what, right. Okay, so we can see here, let's see. I don't think I have actually a default anymore in this, but yeah, so if I run npm start poll, it'll look for, let's see if it actually cancels out, it should. Yeah, could not find a default. Yeah, so if it can't find a default, it'll actually fall back to Docker. If it can't find a Docker, then it will fail. Yeah, and then we have this option now, this client-id custom, that maps to, you can see here, the name of the conf file is custom.conf. That is the ID of the client that you would want to connect to. So if we look here, you can see here I could put HSD as a client ID, HSD underscore local, HSD red, HSD test, and it will use those comps. And actually the server loads all of those up at once. You can see this here. It's loading all of the configs that it has available because something that is currently in progress and should be done actually in time for that beta release is the ability to easily manage client. First step would be to easily manage client config with bPanel CLI, so that annoying step of having to edit a text file and say where you want it to connect it to. It'll just walk you through and say, hey, where do you want to connect it to? And then write the config, and then that'll be available. And then the final step is you don't even have to do any of that. You just spin up bPanel, and then bPanel will see, oh, hey, you don't have any client configs. Would you like to add one? And have a form. You add that. It'll add the config file for you, and then you can switch between them from the UI as well. And that should hopefully make this super easy to use, yeah.
What about multiple clients?
Yeah, so plugins can, you can write a plugin that could connect to a different client in the same interface, but we're kind of going to discourage that because that will make UI, like, if you have like a block explorer that's showing blocks from one client and recent transactions from another, that's really user unfriendly. But what will come with this UI element will be the ability, like, oh, here's a drop down, here's all my clients available. I'm going to switch to this one, and then your UI will refresh, get the new blocks, get the new transactions, get the new wallets. Yeah.
So then you don't have to like put in a client ID, you just start it up and
exactly.
In the UI.
Yeah, which is why the server is now loading up all clients all at once. So that now we just need to have it support on the client.
It's doing that right now.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you don't even need a client.
Correct. You can actually get the information. Like if I were to do, yeah, let me see. Yeah, these are all the clients that I have loaded up. This is like part of the API now. So the front end has access to this information now. We just have to do something with it. So those are in the pipeline and should make hopefully working with or using bPanel a lot easier. All right.
That's going to be a beta feature.
Yes. Any other questions about that? About configs? That's definitely some of the trickiest bits. Once you've got things up and running, it sort of just is like getting those configs right, because that can cause problems. Whether it's the API key, and that's the other problem, is that you need to have that HTTPOS on the node set correctly. Otherwise, your bPanel can't see it, and you won't get any good errors based off of that, because there's no way to know that. So this is just a quick note about Docker that I mentioned. You can just simply run npm install to get everything set up, and then do docker compose up. And as you see at the bottom here, it will spin up 3 containers. And real quickly, for those who are not familiar with how Docker works, Docker basically has this, it's called containerization. Fan is our resident Docker guru as well, if you have any questions about it. It's super useful for testing because it basically creates its own virtual environment, Linux environment, that, so it's isolated, so any sort of like weirdness about your own environment can be abstracted away and you don't have to worry about it. But it also kind of creates this other level in between you and the code that you're working with that could cause some problems, as Dylan has noted. But what's convenient about this is, as noted in the architecture, for bPanel to work, it needs to be connected to a node. And so Docker Compose up can be super convenient if you really just want to see how bPanel works, because it will start up a bcoin node for you. It will automatically generate the client config file, pass it to the bPanel container, and then say, hey, here's the config to connect to the container that I'm running. It will open up all the right ports for you, and then you have something running immediately. It also has this a third container, a certificate server that Mark made, which enables the multi-sig functionality, because the hardware wallets require HTTPS, require these things to be, the website to be served over HTTPS. So sort of handles all of that for you, and then using bPanel's the same. Oh, I should have mentioned that once you have things started up, you can see here, if you're running it locally, it's just localhost 5000, that's the port, localhost :5000, and this is what bPanel looks like out of the box. Yeah, so this is actually, even this is a plugin. bPanel starts with Genesis theme. And actually, I'll show you, I should add one more. Yeah. Yeah, I'll show that in a second too, because it's kind of cool actually to see what that looks like. So like, we're really serious about, and this was upon the insistence of Fan, actually, I think we have to credit for this, is like everything is a plugin. Like the header, the footer, this dashboard, even this sidebar thing, the logo, everything can be customized with a plugin, even the themes, which I'll show in a second as well. So this is, so when you're gonna start it up fresh, we installed these 2 plugins. Well, one plugin is Genesis theme, which includes the dashboard, a blank dashboard, which can be populated. This header, which just has what network you're connected to, although it doesn't support the different chains yet, but we'll add that soon. The IP address of the node you're connecting to, some footer information as well. Leave, please. This is the version of bcoin I'm connected to, how much I'm saying. Yeah. So, and then if I were to, let's see.
Back? No.
Oop. Thank you. It supports, in a single command, installing multiple plugins, but not uninstalling multiple plugins. So, and that will rebuild in a second. This is bPanel with nothing. Yeah, no plugin, no theme. This is. It's part of Genesis theme. Yeah. We just wanted to give something for people to start off with. Cool. All right. So yeah, you just saw this, managing plugins in bPanel. This is bPanel with a fresh install. Dashboard is blank. These instructions go away when you install your first, we call them widgets, and I'll show what that looks like in a second. bPanel CLI is this tool that we've been working on, kind of slowly building this out as we need things in our own development workflow. It lets you install plugins, list plugins, search for plugins. Basically, it defaults to an plugins. I should mention we basically use npm for our plugin system. So plugins, remote plugins are installed from npm. We use it warts and all, unfortunately. The search will do an npm search with the tag of bPanel. So any plugins that are tagged with bPanel will come up in the search, and then you can actually add other search terms for things. Yeah.
Does it have to be a named plugin in a repository, or can you install something from like
you can manually through. There's another config file that manages plugins. There's in the .bpanel file, there's a config.js file, and you can add the format for GitHub would just be the org or the user slash the repo, and it'll install from there. It also supports local plugins. So there's this directory. Let's see. Called local plugins, and if you put plugins in here, these become available as local plugins, which you don't have to install from npm, and will load up. So these are all the things that we are currently working on, and this is good if you want to develop your own plugin. We also have this utility in the bPanel CLI to create a framework for your own plugin, and it'll give you the option to install locally to your local plugins, and then all you have to do is do a let's see here, bPanel CLI dash, so let's do install local at bPanel Genesis theme at, So now if we actually look at that bPanel config, you can see it added this in here, and then bPanel will see that you added it, and we'll do the installation. I have an old version of the dashboard, so I will fix that. Oh yeah, you can see here, there's local and plugins, and bPanel CLI will recognize that difference. And actually, it will even do a check. Let me uninstall that. It will do a check to see if you're trying to install either a local or a remote one, it'll see if that plugin exists, either in the local plugins or on npm before trying to install that, which is kind of useful.
So is the recommended way to develop locally symlinking to the .local? Or
to the
linking?
Yeah, so you can symlink or just put the repo in local plugin. So right now, bPanel CLI create will automatically add the project directory to local plugins, but you can tell it to put it somewhere else, and then we're going to build this command to do a bPanel CLI link if you want to link it to a different directory into your local plugins.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, we actually support putting plugins that are directly in the bPanel project itself, but that's not recommended for.
That's what it was for the hackathon.
Yeah.
Weird. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. This is dope.
Yeah.
This is like much better.
Thank you.
install things like
What's that?
I don't know, most people put all this shit in all the build folder or something.
Right,
like
source
all
or whatever.
projects.
Yeah.
You don't want your source inside someone else's project. So
Right.
So
Gotta keep them separated.
I'm gonna add a bunch of different plugins now. This is just for the dashboard. So you can see it checks the name, checks that it's on npm, and I'll install that in a second. So we'll do the handshake demo.
We need like a loading icon.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, we need to what we need to do is optimize the asynchronous loading and have like a view that like because some of the packages are so big and it's like getting bcoin and handshake stuff down.
You need like a static init bundle that will like
Yeah.
show loading indicator and then the pop-up bundle.
Exactly. We'll get to our optimization. It's tough.
That's like a RC.
So this is the dashboard on Genesis theme with some widgets that we developed. So widgets are they are plugins that can decorate other plugin views. We have a lot of different categories of plugins. Let's connect to an actual test net. Oh, what did I, maybe I,
HSD testnet? Or yeah, I saw a local in there actually.
that's the reg test one. I don't know why it was not liking this API key for both my local reg test and local testnet. All right, so.
Your 2 months looks like mine. It's freaking me out.
So, since I know this is like a little bit all over the place, just as a sort of recap, what we did here was we have a HSD testnet running on my VPS on DigitalOcean. I have a bPanel config that says, okay, here's the IP address. I pass it in my API key. So this is all in this, I can show you, it's just testnet. So we have this, oh no, actually this is running locally. So this is an API key. It says this is a testnet node running on Handshake. That's all you need in this. So once you have your testnet node running locally, that's all you need. You start up the node running locally, you copy your API keys into here, and then I ran bPanel with this and said, hey, use the, oh no, sorry, it was running on, yeah, let's see, yeah, nope, this one. So running on this IP address, which is my DigitalOcean node, so I say, and that, remember I use the HTTP host option. That's all you need. And then I said, hey, I'm using the client ID HSD, and again, soon this will be accessible just from the front end. So you just start it up, and then you can say which node you want to connect it to. Spin that up, and this is the testnet running now, right? Like, and we have this plugin, this peers plugin. You can see what peers I'm connecting to. These are peers that are running Handshake testnet nodes, and a ton in Germany it looks like, which is cool. Occasionally I connect to, Eduardo has a node running in Venezuela, which I can see on here. Yeah. You can just bring some bPanel and Handshake nodes to them. Japan, I wonder if this is some scaling people maybe running nodes.
I think one of the loader peers is in Japan.
Okay.
Or maybe it was, I'm pretty sure it's Japan. It could be Singapore.
These are the blocks. These are the most recent blocks. This uses, so all of these for the developers in the house, this is really just using, for Handshake it's using HS Client, and it's using HS Client and bsock, and there's a whole socket API interface for building plugins to interface with that, but once a new box comes in or a new transaction and enters the mempool, you'll see these things tick up and update live.
Could you open up again?
Huh?
Could you open up one of the boxes?
Oh, one of the box, sure.
should have the statement.
I mean, this is, I think, just whatever comes back from the. Well, we accept PRs.
Oh, I see what you're doing here. Well played, sir.
What's that?
Simple mining in mine block.
Oh yeah. Dude.
Yeah. So let's show some fun with plugins. First, I mean, if we're going to be playing around with Handshake, let's install. Oops, that's not a command. Let's install the special bPanel HDark theme, or skin, actually, we're calling them. So you can see it's installing the package from npm. That's just a log, so it'll actually skip them if it sees it.
HR.
Good old unbound failure.
What operating system are you using?
Someone
Mac.
opened a PR to fix that. I was like,
Because I'm using, I tried to do a npm install bPanel/bPanel CLI, and it says not compatible with operating system architecture.
Oh, Windows, I guess.
Well, this is a virtual box of Ubuntu. It's like 18 point.
But it worked on Arch.
Yeah, well,
Pseudo-
Ubuntu has chronically old Node versions.
Yeah.
So you always have to install custom Node version every time you use Ubuntu.
So what's the optimal?
install like N
Ubuntu's
or
fine, but you can.
N, I like N. And then you N.
It's a version. It's like a version.
Yeah, it's so hard to. It is, and I was gonna, but I'm like, no, I'm not gonna tell
Well, we'll help you set it up after. Yeah.
iPhone XS.
So here's our HDark theme. This is based off of our bdark theme that Injay, previous employee, built, and I basically just added the logo here. So even theme or skins. So to be clear with names, plugins are like anything you can add into bPanel. There are plugins that are like views, like the bPanel dashboard. There are plugins that are skins that are that change the way that things look. There are widgets that decorate other plugins, and yeah.
Question.
Yes.
Is the bPanel still in the old theme? The side menu, sidebar. So the sidebar still looks like it's in the old theme. Is that because it's a different plugin and this plugin isn't like?
Why does it look different? What do you mean?
Or is that the color that's meant for this
Yeah.
for the sidebar? Oh.
Yeah. So we have this whole UI system that actually there's a theming system that gets passed down to all components.
Cool.
So people can build plugins without making sure that it conforms, and as long as you're using our common component library, like everything updates. We have like a theme color palette, and this is from the color palette. This blue, this green, this gradient, even the background. It's all in the palette. So you can make like this table is a common component that just inherits the themes and it updates the colors according to that theme. So for those of you who want to build skins for bPanel, all you really have to do is decide what color palette you like. You update that. You publish that as an object that says, hey, primary color is this hex. Secondary color is this hex. Gradient looks like this. And that will translate down to all plugins that follow our scheme. And you can see that as I install more plugins. So now, so that we can mine some blocks and use the wallet and interact with Handshake, let's simple. I think it's mining panel simple wallet panel name manager. So for our name base friends in the room, it's proof of concept, but what we love is for a name base plugin that's published and people can install it, and you can install your own API client that can connect to people's accounts if they want to, or target their own node if they want to do that, or confirm that purchases worked against their own node, things like that. So I won't try. The reason why the simple mining plugin is super useful for testing, but the reason why we don't install it by default is because if you run it with testnet and there's like buttons to mine some blocks, it'll just kill your machine if you don't realize what network you're in. So we want it to be a very conscious decision. Somebody installed it. Yeah, I did it to myself once.
Oh yeah, you told me about that. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, like my battery would die in 30 minutes. It's because I was trying to mine Bitcoin testnet. Not great. All right, so you can see here. So I added those plugins, and here they are on the sidebar. And you can see these are all, adopting from the theme. I can change the theme again, and you'll see what that looks like.
Can't find it.
I'm not going to try, but you can see this is just. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you get some information. This is all from the RPC endpoints. The stuff so in our docs, we show how you can get this information, and really we want the development experience to just get rid of thinking about the blockchain stuff as much as possible. And so you can really just use a client and say, bPanel client, get, or you basically execute the RPC commands, and it'll give you back a bunch of information, and you can just output that in a table like we have here, right? So this is really just get blocks, right? It gets a block number, it puts it back, and then you can see it just puts this information. You don't even have to think about how to show this information. We even have this copy component here too. So, what is a name that has been claimed on testnet? Huh? Foo? Really unclaimed.
Eric. Oh, Turbo Maze, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Turbo.
Oh, right, because yeah.
I was getting for testnet for some reason a lot of this, and I don't know why.
The claim period.
Right, but so it's just
No one claimed
for testnet. Oh, okay.
So all the reserved names seem to be available.
Jing.
Oh, right, because everything just.
I think it might have because I was testing this a couple weeks ago.
It's really calm. It's really calm.
confusing.
Yeah.
What's that? So we're at 16,000, but what that means is that you can actually open auctions and also see names. So I'll do this when I'm actually mining, but actually if somebody wanted to send me some...
We originally didn't expect the test net.
For people going
It's actually
So you notice that the wallet plugin hasn't been updated. We still we're adding some support for plugins to easily switch between chains. So right now the denominations are still in BTC. Working on it, but
I just sent some over.
what's that?
I just sent some over.
All right. So let's actually see. Look at that. So the mempool already updated with that transaction. Let's see if it is pending. And there's my pending transaction.
Cool.
Super cool. And yeah, so you can see. So that's a good way to kind of display what we mean by blockchain management system, right? Like with WordPress, you have this one backend, this one database that you're sort of controlling, and people are interacting with that single database. But here we had somebody that's not connected to my local database at all, that sends a transaction, but the state of my app updates according to the state of the blockchain. All right, so I'm going to show real quick sort of I'm going to mine some blocks, and that way we can see how interacting with the chain and Handshake works. So here we go, and you can see here, because this is a fresh reg test node, there's no blocks. I don't have any names or anything. Actually, I wonder, because no blocks have been mined. Yeah, there you go. So let's mine some blocks. So I'm mining some blocks. You can see them update here. Great. And then in my wallet here, if I click on my accounts, and this is, by the way, I made this actually like footer address thing to also show how plugins can, by different developers, can interact with each other. So you have this wallet dashboard plugin that receives an address from a wallet, and then this footer address, or this wallet plugin, simple wallet, that generates an address based on the wallet, and then this receive address plugin in the footer that says, hey, if there's a primary address, put it in the footer. So that way now, I can go around to other plugins and have something to easily copy. So this is the sort of the thing that we want to enable with the plugin system.
Because the footer is the plugin itself. If you don't like that, or you think something else should go there, you just
Exactly, you can uninstall it.
footer plugin in the main.
So starts at block 210. Let's mine some more then.
Only.
Yeah. How much money can you
This works as like real mining, local and like GPU information.
just a
Real
CPU.
mining.
It's just a CPU miner. That's the only thing that the RPC supports right now. But it could be built. We need to support some other clients.
issue.
But
That would be dope.
Level thing you would need
What's
to-
that?
Is it a plugin level thing that somebody would need to build, or is that
we need to support a different client. Yeah.
Like a bcoin plugin.
Yeah, that's like a bcoin.
Yeah, it's a tough one to do. We do want to like add more robust mining support because this could have a really good use case for like mining pools, for example. But you can check the state of the network and the hash power and things like that based off of it. So
You can also just make a plugin that doesn't even connect to like bcoin or anything. It just connects directly to your mining.
Yeah,
thing and then
right.
you click mine.
and you can have the client in the like browser level thing that does like just normal HTTP requests. Yeah. All right, so let's see here. I have this auction manager, and let's check the auction. No auction found. So how does this work? I open bid, right? Yeah. All right. So that's the response. Again, this is proof of concept. So it didn't need to be pretty, but this is what we got. Now, if we check the auction info, oh yeah, we got to mine that transaction. How many? What is it? 10 before, or just one before it gets found, right?
Testnet, it's different.
Red chest, very different too.
Rich test with-
So one, it should find it right now, right? So now it's like an open auction. Yeah. So before it said auction didn't exist, I mined a block. You can see that it exists. Open period starts at block 236 and ends 247. So I need to mine a few more blocks before I can start mining on it or bidding on it. But I mean, this is also just a super useful testing utility. Like you install this, and even if you're doing backend stuff, to be able to just have this available. So let's.
Could we make a plugin that shows the RPC calls that the UI is making?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you could-
Yeah, that could be a middleware. So open period. Is it still? Oh. Yeah, I was thinking about putting a footer plugin that showed the height rather than the percentage. That'd be way more useful. But you don't even need to put a PR up for that. You can just put a plugin if you like that idea. All right. Now you can see, okay, bidding. So let's put a bid, some dollar reduce.
The lockup, is there some arithmetic that happens, or do I have to do my own arithmetic with this?
You have to do your own arithmetic, but I default, once you move it, let me put it something higher. It will default to the lowest, to at least a bid.
Oh, okay.
Again, like this can be, you can do arithmetic. This is just using redots, so you can check the state and make sure it's on, you can do your own validation on it.
It'd be nice if it showed you like how many coins you have.
All right, Dan.
Let's stop it, Dan. This is the POC. Are you gonna build this out, or I guess that's valid, right? Are you gonna build this plugin out, or is it just to like show us? 'Cause this is to show us.
I probably won't build this out anymore.
Okay.
It's a proof of concept. It allows for just interacting with your plugin, but I think there's people more like you guys want me to build out the infrastructure of bPanel, right? I gotta focus on that. All right. All right. So you can see here the status of the bid. Right. So I sent my bid. Let's see, get auction info. It doesn't actually show bids. I think that might be part of the thing, but anyway, now if I go to my names, actually, you can actually see this is the name I'm bidding on. You can see the information on it, and I don't have to go through the rest of the process, but if I were to do you can do the reveal, you can close the bid, you can win it, and then you can see all the names that you have. You can send renewals. You can say if you do the update, you can send in the DNS record, and yeah. So to repeat, it's happening.
Who was asking about glue? Someone was asking about glue.
Glue?
Yeah.
Oh.
They showed it. Doesn't matter. I don't remember who was asking.
So I just have a couple slides left with the message being the next steps are to BIDL, right? Our goal, anybody can create a user interface that solves the unique use case of either the market that they're aiming for, whether it's consumer wallets or if it's enterprise level or if it's security. But this kind of hypothesis that we're operating under with bPanel is that actually we can create the most utility for everybody if everybody gets to sort of work on and iterate their own use cases. And it's kind of cool, especially that bPanel can support 3 different chains now with bcash, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin, and Handshake, which all have their different use cases. And what's that? And Litecoin, at some point, it won't be hard to actually migrate that over soon too as well. That'll actually be even easier because it'll still use bClient, which is easier.
Does bcash use bClient?
It does now. They might diverge at some point in the near future. I think this next hard fork might cause us to diverge the client, unfortunately. So bPanel CLI has this utility called bPanel CLI Create. And if you forget this, you want to know any of these, there's a bPanel CLI help. And you have create, list, install, uninstall, search. Actually, this is just cool. You can see all of the plugins that you have available now labeled with bPanel that you can install. What's that?
It's just like iterates all the plugins.
It's basically npm search with the bPanel keyword. Yeah, not even just a prefix, because if somebody does an npm package that has the keyword bPanel, then it will show up in this search. So you can do dashboard and see ones that are involved with the dashboard. So these are dashboard widgets that you can install for bPanel. That's pretty cool. So bPanel Create, bPanel CLI Create will create a boilerplate project. That sort of gives you the skeleton of a project. It'll ask you a bunch of questions. What's the name of your plugin? What's the developer name? Is this going to be a theme or a skin? So it will actually create the file that you need to insert the styles for the skin, that you want to create, and will basically spit out all of those files into the local plugins directory. Or you can tell it to move it into a different directory if you want as well, if you have your own special development environment. But by default, it will put it there, and then all you have to do is bPanel CLI install -l, and then the name of your plugin, and it'll add that to the config, and then you can actually load up your plugin right there. I would do that now, but we've done enough demoing, I think, for one day. Some plugin ideas. If anybody's interested in starting to play around with this, we have a ton. We have stuff on bpanel.org as well for ideas, but Name Explorer. So this is just for dealing with your wallet, but you can probably do a lot more robust things just querying the blockchain. Even just a more robust Block Explorer plugin. We only have this recent blocks plugin that just shows the 10 most recent blocks, but you could probably do one that takes in a hash like other block explorers. And also something beyond the MVP, Name Manager, either as a PR for the existing plugin or to do your own. We've talked about having a Tmux flavored skin. Sounds like a weird snack targeted for developers, but Tmux is it's basically like my CLI, my terminal. It's a terminal tool that lets you do a lot of cool stuff. But yeah, like the default theme is it's kind of like a green and black, like matrixy type coloring plus. Yeah. Yeah. And like these are so easy. If you look in the repos to see what the Genesis theme project looks like, or what the HDark or BDark, these are like 20 lines of code, and it's literally it's like recognizable CSS. You can fork those projects, copy that, and like change one color in there, and you'll have a new theme published at 10 p.m. and anybody can install it. It's so easy. And like sort of a version 1 thing that we want to do is to be able to create themes in the bPanel itself, because the theme is actually controlled with Redux, for those that are familiar with Redux, and so you can actually update these values in your view, see your theme change, and then export a new theme file and then publish that at 10 p.m. Which would be really cool.
Like themes. So
What's that?
Put a theme builder in your theme.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it gets super meta really quick. And then I think something that would be super useful for Handshake right now especially, and this could be useful for any of the networks, but is a Faucet plugin. There's no Faucet UI right now for Handshake testnet. It'd be cool to have a testnet Faucet plugin. You can strip away the other, you can make sure that it doesn't install a wallet like interaction view with it. I mean, just has to be a simple input form, give us your address, and then that will fire off a send on the back end. And then you can deploy bPanel. Like we've been looking at it on localhost 5000, but if you put this up on your VPS and you target that IP, or I guess you could even use a Handshake DNS, you can access it that way.
Who's gonna buy bPanel?
What's that?
We know who's gonna buy bPanel.
Yeah. All right, I think that's it. Oh yeah, guides. We have a bunch of guides and API documentation. bcoin.io guides or API docs go hand in hand really well, or complement Handshake stuff. So if there's stuff you haven't been able to find on Handshake, you can also check bcoin.io if it's something that could apply to both.
You can update the handshake.org. There's a documentation site.
Are you asking for PRs?
Yes, totally. Totally asking for PR.
Yeah. So yeah, we have guides like bcoin script guides. So if because one of the cool things about bcoin and HSD in general is it's so modular that you can pull in pieces of bcoin, pieces of Handshake, and do like client-side manipulation of things. So like for example, one very cool idea to do for bPanel would be a password manager where you use actually just at 44, the like HD PAS to generate deterministic passwords that you can then use elsewhere. And as long as you know the mnemonic, you know the password, you have your passwords. Trezor did this. They have like a sample app for their hardware wallet, but you can do this with bPanel directly.
There's one for Ledger too.
Was that? Yeah. Oh, they have that now too? Oh, that's cool. That's something that's cool to do in this ecosystem, because you can just pull in those tools. You don't even need to be connecting to a node to use that, which is really cool. And then all the different projects, all of the plugins that we're developing in-house are in the bpanel-org repo. bcoin's projects, of course, are in bcoin.org, and Handshake's in Handshake.org. All right. Yeah.